Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Franchise Show. This is the show where we get under the hat of some of the most important topics in franchising. And it's live. Well, it's live if it's 5:15 in the UK for about 45 minutes. So put your comments if you are here live. And you know what? Even if you're not here live and you're watching this in the future, put a comment in there because we can go back and we can have a look at it. That's how these things work. But this is a live format. And what do? Each week we take a different subject and we have a lovely guest. And today is obviously no exception to that. We have a fantastic guest today. So today's subject is franchise brokers. And what is a franchise broker? How do we use them? And what difference is a franchise broker to a franchise consultant? All of these sort of questions we're going to hopefully talk about together today. So please let us know if you are here. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our wonderful guest today, and it's Michael Reeder. Michael, welcome to the Franchise Show.
Hey, Harvey, great to be here. Thank you for having me, and hello, everyone.
That's fantastic to have you with us. While people settle in and start putting a few comments up, perhaps you'd just like to introduce yourself. And after that, let's introduce what is a franchise broker. So please introduce yourself to our wonderful audience.
Absolutely. So my name is Michael Reeder, and I am a CPA. So in America, that's an acronym for Certified Public Accountant. So accounting and tax. I own an accounting and tax practice. We're based in Chicago and the Portland, Maine area, but we have clients all across the country. We're stateside only, and we have team members all across the country as well. And so we have a niche. We have two niches as a CPA firm. So we're a CPA firm for small businesses and individuals, but we have a niche working with franchisee businesses as well as real estate professionals and real estate investors. And so we get connected to our franchisee clients from our nationwide network of franchise consultants, our nationwide network of franchise professionals. Several of which are franchise consultants or franchise brokers. We also have relationships with franchisors and franchise funding companies, and franchise sales organizations that refer to their franchisees as well. But I am very well immersed in the franchise consultant / broker community in the United States. And that's what we're going to, unpack, like what is all the different, like what's the difference between the different terminologies, because, there is actually like a lot of, they mean the same thing in a lot of regards too. So like, we'll get into all that, I'm sure. But, all of these franchise brokers, right? Like they're working with, candidates that want to invest in franchising, and they're working with their candidates to look at the different options available to them, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. And as their clients, as these franchise buying candidates have questions about entity structure strategy, funding strategy, tax strategy for small business, certain items of the franchise disclosure document that are required, in the U.S. regulated by the FTC, accounting questions like setting up their bookkeeping, pro forma financial questions, especially if they need a pro forma to get ready for their SBA loan application, et cetera, et cetera. My nationwide network of franchise brokers, they all just say, oh, talk to Mike. He'll answer those questions, because the brokers, they're not CPAs, and it's a bet. And referring them to me and my team. Yeah, go ahead, Harvey.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to get you on to have this conversation about franchise brokers, some people might be saying, well, why don't you get a franchise broker on to have this conversation? And you know what? I wanted a discussion. You deal with lots of brokers. You're from the US, where brokers are very much part of the culture in franchising, and not the same way here in the UK. And I just wanted someone who had that experience with brokers who can talk about the topic in general. So look, that's a fantastic introduction to both yourself and a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. Before we get into that subject, I would like to introduce some wonderful people who have joined us here early on, because you know what? This show is all about you. It's about our community. And it's fantastic to have everybody here, and I want to introduce and recognize everybody here. So this is Omar, and Omar is a good friend of mine. He's based in the US. He was recently in London. Great to have you here. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts on brokers and consultants and how we support our industry in this way. We have Jody Reed here, and she's good evening all, and Jody is a compliance expert here in the UK. Great to have Jody here. We've got Tim Morris here. Always good to have Tim, a good friend, a fantastic advocate of franchising, and helps high-performing franchisees here in the UK. Tim's but evening franchise friends from around the world. Really looking forward to listening to this subject. Well, it's going to be a good one, and we're going to get into franchise brokers and what they are and what this means when we've said hello to all the fantastic people that are here. We have the ever wise Simon Wise. And he's put, hello, franchise friends. Well, hello to you, Simon. Always good to have you here. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts on consultants, brokers, the difference between the two, what it means to our industry, and getting into all of these subjects. We've got the wonderful Nick Pleven from eTalent, one of our fantastic sponsors. And of course, you know what's going to happen. Yeah, there you go, Nick. And Nick has put, hello, everyone. Good to be here this evening, but not as exciting as being in Chicago at the moment. Oh, well, fantastic. Blues Brothers and all of that. I've been to Chicago on business as well, so it was fantastic. Who else have we got? We have David Moffat here. I had a call with David today. Fantastic chap. Working to launch Carl's Jr. here in the UK. It's going to be a very exciting time for David into 2025. And he's put, hello all, looking forward to this one. Well, we're looking forward to it too, David. And fantastic to have you with us. Give us your thoughts, of course. We have the lovely Penny Hopkinson. And now Penny has written a fantastic book. She is one of our sponsors. Now, we always have this thing, do I get my camera the right way around when I promote her book? And do I today? Yes, I do. And there it is. Great to have you here, Penny. And she's put, hello, everybody. Great to be back in the franchise community again. Well, it's fantastic to have you here. We've got a question coming up from Simon, so we'll save that for a bit while we introduce a couple more people. We've got Paul Sims here. He's from Pittsburgh, and he's put, hello, friends. Well, hi to you, Paul. Paul is a great advocate of what I do on a Sunday to help anybody who's looking for a new job, and it's always great to have you here. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts. We have a new person here, I think. Welcome, first of all, to the Franchise Show, to Jonathan Pace, here from Chicago. Another person from Chicago. Chicago is getting all the limelight tonight.
Chicago is representing today.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have Natalia. Natalia is a former guest of the show. And our expert legal beagle and into all of the contracts and all these sort of things in the UK. So great to have you here, Natalia. And she's put, hello all, missed last week. So glad to be here this week. Well, of course, we are glad to have you here too. Now, we're going to get to questions, and look, fire all the questions you can at us about what is a broker, how can we use brokers. But look, Michael, I'm going to start with a pretty obvious question and the title of the episode. I know we have franchise professionals from the US and from all over the world. And in the US, a broker is a terminology that's used and people are more familiar with, but not so much here in the UK. So perhaps, first of all, you could explain what is a franchise broker and what the difference between a franchise consultant and a franchise broker is.
Great question, Harvey. So I have two answers, right? Like one answer is, and I was taking notes as you were talking. One answer is, I would say the following, like in the US, the following four terms in substance mean the same thing. And then also, like, if there is a difference, what is the difference? Like in what context is the difference, right? So the first one is franchise broker can be used interchangeably. If you hear a franchise broker or a franchise consultant or a franchise recruiter or a franchise coach, those four things can commonly mean the same thing, meaning that it is a third-party independent franchise professional that is recruiting, that is headhunting, right, on platforms such as LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn, they even have accounts with ZipRecruiter and Indeed. They create their own content as well, and they generate their own leads, right? And they bring awareness to the franchise industry. To prospective franchisee, right? To prospective franchisees, prospective franchise buying candidates, right? And they reach out. They may have they may buy leads from places like Biz Buy Sell, et cetera, et cetera. And so they are third-party headhunters essentially, and they generate their own leads through a variety of methods that I just mentioned, and they connect with the leads. They get they usually have them take some sort of a personality test. A Zoracle is a popular one. There's another one I can't remember the name off the top of my head, and then they use this personality. They help them. They get to know the candidate, and then they introduce the candidate to brands, right? And then and then once they introduce them to brands, then the brands tend to take it from there. And if they're interested in brands, then the brands are taken through their process, et cetera, et cetera. And then if that franchise, and then when the broker, right, connects them to the brand, then the broker, when they refer them, they get they register that prospective franchisee with the brand. So then in the event that prospective franchisee ends up investing in that brand, then the franchisor will pay a commission to the referring broker. So that's, a broker can mean a consultant, a coach, a recruiter, right? And then if there's any difference, like franchise consultants can also, be what they can also mean, in addition to what I just said, is that they could also be, a professional that works like on the franchisor development side and to helps, and helps that business become a franchisor.
I think it's really interesting because I think here in the UK, we have franchise consultants, and well, there goes my cat. You can tell it's live, you see. Here in the UK, if we have a franchise consultant, typically what happens is they come into a business and they get to know the business, but the franchisor is supplying that consultant the leads. And that franchise consultant is then taking those leads, working through the process of getting those potential franchisees interested in the business, then signing them up and potentially then taking a commission. My understanding on a broker, and you mentioned this, and this is what's really interesting. A broker, of my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but a broker is somebody who not only does that process of signing a new franchisee or matching a franchisee to a franchise business, but also brings that lead. So they have those leads and they bring them to the franchisor. Is that your understanding of things there in the US? As a franchise broker, would they bring that lead to the franchisor?
Yes, it is my understanding, right? And again, I'm not a franchise broker, but I have a nationwide network of them that refer me their accounting and tax, prospective franchise clients. But it is my understanding that franchise brokers here in the U.S., they generate their own leads and they bring those leads to the franchisor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's really interesting as well, because I think that's the difference, that's perhaps what we don't have here, or that we haven't necessarily got too deeply into here in the UK. We have some fantastic platforms for generating the interest in these franchise businesses, and they're then either taken by the franchisor and their employees, their franchise recruiters, or they're perhaps taken by then a franchise consultant. Look, let's have another look at the comments. This is a great conversation. If you have just joined us, this is the Franchise Show, and today we are talking all about what is a franchise broker. Let's have a look. We've got we had a comment. Let's take Simon's comment quickly first that came in earlier on. And Simon's, but do franchise brokers feed off the leads generated by their franchisor clients, or build the mountain to bring to Mohammed? Well, look, Simon is interestingly just touched on exactly what we've just been talking about. And it's really interesting, Mike, that in the US, the terminology between broker, consultant, coach is mixed. It's still mixed. People still don't necessarily know which one is what. I think here in the UK, we definitely have consultants. And I think we think of a broker as someone who is bringing that entire process to a franchisor. And maybe a broker is someone who's got a network of potential franchisees that could be interested in a franchise business, and they're directing them towards a particular business. But a great point that Simon's made, and in your experience dealing with brokers, do they have their own? You mentioned a couple of platforms there that the brokers use to get their leads, to then filter those down and to see which ones they bring to which franchisor. Do you think that the better brokers have a black book of or a network of prospective franchisees? Are they the most successful brokers in the US, would you say?
It's a great question. So Simon, to answer your question, the answer, right, it would be, to choose between one of the two. The answer is, the latter, build the mountain to bring to Muhammad. And so, it's, I think that I think that I think that you need to water multiple gardens. Like the good ones water multiple gardens, right? Like they're working the LinkedIn garden, they're working the content creation garden, which goes up on social media and on YouTube, etc. They're working the job boards like Indeed and ZipRecruiter. They're buying lead packs from places like BizBuySell and I think another one's called FranchiseGator. Again, like this is kind of where certain brokers might know the actual lead gen platforms better than me because I'm the accountant. But I know a lot of franchise consultants, franchise brokers, to be dangerous to at least have this conversation at a high level. And I just think that and then also I think the good ones also have a they have an email drip campaign. Right. So it's like, if they're talking, and then they're touching their prospective, they're touching their prospect list from a variety of ways. They might talk to someone who's not ready to buy today, but they get them on the drip campaign. And then through that drip campaign, that prospective buyer is getting educated on all these various different things, in the newsletters that they're getting from the franchise broker. And then, 12 to 18 months later, that candidate gets laid off from their job, and they don't want to go back to another corporate job and get laid off again. So they want to throw their hat in the ring as a business owner, and they like franchising as the way to achieve that means to an end. And so, I just think that the good ones, the good ones are, just watering multiple lead gen gardens. And I can, I maybe a franchise broker listening and say, actually, Mike, blah, 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 blah. But I think that it's just one of those things that you have to water multiple gardens, and then you also have to nurture the leads once you have them.
Of course. And I like the idea and the analogy of gardening. I think it's used quite a lot in franchising, because nurturing a garden, you have to water it, you have to feed it. Things will grow organically, but they're generally things you don't want to grow in particular places, and weeds and that sort of thing, and they're not the ones that you want to grow. So I think the analogy of using a garden, and when we're talking about brokers and that they get their leads from different locations, different services, I think it was really interesting that you touched on there about content creation using platforms like this, LinkedIn, to promote, to engage with a community. I think it's really powerful stuff. I mean, I've put up one of our lovely sponsors there, Businesses for Sale, because Businesses for Sale here in the UK offer potential franchisors, potential franchisees. They connect the two. And we have some fantastic consultants here in the UK, and I just think it's a really interesting conversation for a UK or even a European audience to listen to, because I think in the US, the brokers have sometimes, they're in charge of the vehicle. They're steering that lead to the franchisor, and finally to get them over the line. I think it's a little bit more passive here. It's a little bit more that the franchisor is in control of that here, and the consultant is assisting that process and helping people go through that process and seeing if people are aligned. But I think my view of a broker is taking it to another level, as Simon's comment said right there about bringing the mountain to Muhammad, and I think that's just exactly what happens. I'm going to put that comment back up there. Let's have a little look. We've got a few other people that have joined, and a few other comments in here as well. We've got the wonderful Danny here, and Danny has written, I've got all the books. She's written a lovely book about franchising as well, so please check out Franchise Fame. And she's not even a sponsor, you see. But I love supporting our wonderful franchise community. And there's some fantastic people here. And Danny's put, hey guys, an interesting topic, especially if you are dealing with franchise brands in the US, something we are missing here in the UK. See, again, Mike, this is something that we feel, I think, as a community, that maybe we're missing out on. Maybe we haven't explored it enough. Maybe it hasn't worked for whatever reason in the past as a broker, and we definitely, we do look to the US. I think we can learn from each other, but the US has been doing franchising longer than the UK. You're a bigger franchising network. So I think it's really interesting to see what happens, take the best of it to the UK. And I think that, we are missing that. If someone can mix, I'm going to use your analogy. If someone can come into the UK market and water multiple gardens, nurture multiple gardens, whether that's LinkedIn, whether that's a platform like Businesses for Sale, or whether it's other ways of generating that interest and those leads. And I think, I think it's really interesting, and I think it's correct what Danny was saying there. I think we're missing out on the brokers here in the UK. I wonder whether the US brokers would look to coming over to the UK and and offering that type of service here. It's an interesting one. What do you make of this?
Well, I don't know too much about this, but I do know I don't know what the context is, but I do know that there's a brokerage or a consulting company in the US called the Franchise Consulting Company. And I've seen stuff that they do stuff in other countries. What they do in other countries, whether they're doing consulting or something on like the franchisor development side, I'm not exactly sure, but like they're the one franchise broker, again, this is where it's like interchangeably, like franchise consulting in this context would be the same activity as like a franchise, as a franchise broker, a franchise coach, or a franchise recruiter. I've seen the Franchise Consulting Company. Shout out to Franchise Consulting Company, great company. They've done stuff. I see them doing stuff in other countries. I think that they're doing it in other countries. Are they doing it in the UK? I'm not sure, but inquiring, to them might be, something to get context and franchise consulting, the way it's done in the US, if it's being done in other countries, how that works. They seem to be leading the trend in that regard.
I think you're right. I just want to say hello to Jason Kaber of SeoSamba. And strangely, your QR code is on the screen now, my friend. Great. Always great to have you here, Jason. And Jason has put, hi, Harvey and Michael. And Jason is based in the US. It'd be really interesting to hear your thoughts on brokers, and your experience of brokers, and and the pluses and the minuses of using brokers in your franchise business to help grow it. I think any franchisor, it doesn't matter whether you're in the UK or the US, you're always looking for ways to grow your business, to develop your business, and to do that in a way that you find people that are aligned. But, I've been reading things recently about brokers who perhaps get people to sign up to multi-site because that's in their interest, because they get a better deal out of it. And, I think the idea of a broker, the idea of someone who can bring everything to the table is it's a good idea. There's some great brokers out there that really take the time to align a potential franchisee with a franchisor and make sure that relationship's right. Let's have a look at another few comments, and then perhaps we can look at your relationships with brokers over the years. What you've advised them in. I know that you have advised them in elements of things like FDDs and the financial elements of that, making sure they get that part of it right. Let's introduce a few more people that have joined us. I definitely want to say hello to Jitin. Jitin is a former guest on the show, a franchisee aged just 22, and he's put, "Good evening, Harvey, Michael, and franchise friends." Well, Jitin, it's always a pleasure to have you with us, my friend. So fantastic. Let's have a look at a quick question here from Simon before we get into your experiences, Mike, with brokers and how you've helped them on the sort of finance side of things. Do brokers spend more on lead gen than franchisors then? It's a really interesting point, because, as I say, what we're trying to look at here, and especially, let's look at this from a financial point of view as an accountant here, and you've got you've got a business, and you've got a potential spend on attracting the right franchisees to your business. And you can do that in various ways. You can do that by reaching out to aggregator platforms that provide you with unqualified leads, right? Which are, I believe in the US, the conversion rate of unqualified leads is about 1 in 200, right? In the UK, it's probably more like 1 in 100. But either of those numbers is a big filtering down process to get the right people involved. And as a man of numbers, you're obviously talking to businesses to advise them as to what is the best use of their money, what is the best, the most productive way of spending money. Would you say to a franchise business that it's better to go out, find your own leads, employ staff, convert those? Or would you say, look, use a broker, use that on a commission basis, let them bring that lead to you?
It's a great question. As is always the answer in so many things, right, is it depends. A lot of that depends on like what is the preference of the leadership of the franchisor. So just to take a step back, first of all, like not every franchisor in the country in America works with brokers. Like there are a contingent that do, and there are a contingent that don't. And so for those that don't, they invest in their own lead generation in a variety of methods. And for ones that, and a lot of Zors will tell you that a lot of their, they like to. Like whenever one of their franchisees, I'll talk about resales right now, just specifically, I'll rabbit hole into resales. A lot of like whenever one of their existing franchisees wants to sell, franchisors love it when other existing franchisees come in and buy, because that, the buyer in that context already has a an in-depth understanding of their brand because they are in the same brand. But so for the ones that for the franchisors that do work with brokers, they have contracts. They have contracts with the brokers, so that when a prospective buyer referred to the franchisor from the referring broker invests in the franchisor, then the franchisor, then that prospective franchisee is going to pay a franchise fee, an initial franchise fee. And then a portion of that franchise fee is going to get paid out to the broker as a commission. And so that commission represents the cost to the franchisor, like the lead gen costs, right? To the franchisor that works with brokers. Whereas franchises that don't work with brokers, they just have to invest in their own, whether it's, Google or,
and in
whatever.
your experience, is it better value? Does it represent a lower cost to use a broker, or does it represent a lower cost if you apply a sort of in-house operation to attract your franchisees? As an accountant, you're looking obviously to keep costs to a minimum, make sure profits are good, make sure all of these things are ticked. So it is a really interesting question. As to, you mentioned in the US, some companies do, some companies don't. I get it that it's on a case by case basis, but is there any stats in the US that what does a broker charge in terms of percentage, or a fee? Is it hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars? What is it? I'm not
I'm not exactly sure if it's like a set percentage or something, but like I know that like a common for like a single unit, like if someone invests in a franchise, and they pay an initial franchise fee for like one territory, and it's like, and the franchise fee is $50,000 for that specific brand, that the referring consultant's going to usually get somewhere around like 20 or 30 grand. So somewhere in the ballpark of like 40% tends to be the common. I'm not saying that that's like the standard, but that's what I see a lot. Yeah. And then for ZORs that work with brokers, the benefit with that is, they're only paying out, like they're paying on the back end, right? Like they're collecting the franchise fee and they're paying a commission out on the back end, versus ZORs that, and I'm not saying, I'm sure that there are pros to ZORs that don't work with brokers, but one of the cons is all of the lead generation expenses that go in, and all of the talking to prospective franchisees that don't end up moving forward, right? Because like the brokers, are essentially like that first line of are like that first, like they are the front lines essentially of like going out headhunting, like separating the serious buyers from the tire kickers, the interested versus the not interested. Like the brokers are the ones that are going through all that, and then they, and if they connect a prospective franchisee to a ZOR, and that prospective franchisee invests in that ZOR, that broker is going to get a commission, right? So it's like they do have a five-figure incentive, and so. But the ZORs that don't work with brokers, they're going to have to pay for a bunch of costs to go mine through the whole marketplace. Like you said, the 200 to 1, whatever the metric is,
There's a lot of costs involved in the conversion of that. I mean, we've got some great questions coming up actually from Tim, from Jason, and from Jitten, and we are going to get to those questions. But is it commonplace? You mentioned there 40%, $20,000 to $30,000. I've heard these figures as well. Is it commonplace in your experience as an accountant, when you look at these numbers, that also a broker will apply a retainer or a consultancy fee as well as that, or is it just on a winning basis, just when they sign that franchisee to that brand? What's more typical in your experience?
The latter, contingency. Like there are a few that tend to charge flat fee, And then in the flat fee, like, you know, if they end up getting a commission on the back end, then they'll give the referring they'll give the franchisee some sort of rebate. Like I've seen that and then again, like that's some brokers kind of being creative and being different than the pack, but the pack tends to, it's most often where it's just pure commission on the, it's just pure commission. You only get a commission if your candidate invests in a brand, and all the candidates that you can like a broker, the candidate has all the leverage. In my opinion, like the candidate has all the leverage because there's no cost to work with the broker, and like the candidate can work with the broker for like 6 to 9 months and then decide the last second to just like they're about to sign the franchise agreement, and then they decide not to at the last second. And that's it. Like the broker gets nothing, and they just keep the pipeline. That can happen, And so that's there are some brokers / consultants out there that establish some sort of fixed fee stuff, like so that way they protect themselves whether the prospective franchisee invests or not. But then the negative of that is that, that broker is competing with a bunch of brokers that are charging nothing and are only getting paid by the franchisor if the franchisee invests. And there are also, I have lots of clients that, I talk to them, they're like, yeah, I'm working with like 3 brokers or 3 consultants, and who knows if like each one knows that they're talking to each other. But it's the candidate has all the leverage, and the like the way it is in the United States right now, the franchise buying candidate has all the leverage. Like they can work with a broker, they can stack 3 brokers up against one another, and it's pretty much just so there is that dynamic, and there is no commitment, at least now. I'm pretty sure that there's just like the candidates can back out whenever. There's no obligation, nothing. Like that's the flip side of the other, on the other side, it's, oftentimes 5-figure commission. If the candidate signs like a 9-pack, if they invest in like 9 territories of some brand, that could be a 6-figure commission, depending on the brand and stuff like that. So there's there's dollar amounts, right? But on the flip side, there can be lots of candidates that just come in through like lots of tire kickers, spend a lot of time. And that's just kind of like the nature of the beast of a franchise broker in the United States these days.
I get it. It's really, really interesting what you've just said there. That you can get a franchisee candidate that can get 3 franchise brokers playing one off against the other, and like you say, then if you're a broker and you can get a franchise candidate that's going to sign up to a multi-site agreement, you're going to get a 6-figure return to that. That's obviously going to be an incentive, a big incentive. And therefore there's going to be a little bit, I would have thought, a little bit of pressure there for people in the US that maybe are thinking, oh, I'll do one and see how it goes, right? And you've got a broker that's saying, look, no, we're going to get you a really good deal. This is all just opinions. We're not naming anybody. This is just a conversation. But you could get a broker that would say, well, look, sign up for a multi-site deal here because you'll get a better deal on it. But really, it's because they're getting their return, and 1 or 2 per year is their business, isn't it? Fascinating stuff. We are flying through today, so I knew it would be a fantastic conversation. We've got 3 more questions at least that we're going to look at. Very quickly, I do want to say we really value our audience here. It's always about our audience. I wanted to say a couple of things. Please, first of all, scan the QR code top left. Scan our lovely sponsor Gather's QR code as well, but scan the QR code top left because that takes you to a survey about our show. And you can add topics that you'd like to talk about in the future and give us your thoughts on it. And I'm going to change this up each week. The other thing I really want to say is if you get an invite for this show, always just accept it. Because if you accept it, you get reminders, and it really helps me because if you accept the invitation, I can just go back and invite you again. So please, if you get an invite to this show, just accept it. If you can't be here, it's not a problem at all, but just accept the invites. That would be absolutely fantastic, and it would help me a lot. So please do that. Let's have a little look at a comment here from Jason. Jason has put, brokers are great when they match the offering and can support the brand's messaging to develop a primary relationship prior to the introduction of the brand. There are a lot of great brokers out there who care about getting the right fit for the franchise. Yeah, I think this is what we've been saying. The idea of a broker, to me, just makes sense. It makes sense because it's someone who brings a lead, who cares about that franchisee and what they're going to do, wants them to be happy, wants them to be aligned, wants them to find the right business. And a true great broker, when they found that franchisee that matches that great business, let's go back to gardening. If you find a plant and it's got the right soil and it's got the right amount of water and the right amount of food, that plant flourishes and grows. And it's just the same thing. If you force 20 bulbs into a pot, they won't grow. There's not enough room. It's not quite right. If you don't feed or water, the analogy of gardening that you used, Mike, was, I think, spot on for this. Great point there, Jason, as well. Thanks so much.
I would say just to expand on what Jason's comment, and also Harvey, what you're saying is that the brokers do the vetting, right? So the ZORs don't have to do the vetting. Like the brokers do the vetting for them. So that's the benefit of for franchisors working with brokers, is that they do the vetting for so the ZORs don't have to, because for the ZORs that don't work with brokers, they have to have their own internal team that does all the vetting and going through all of the bad applicants, in order to find that one diamond in the rough here and there.
And like we said, that could be 1 in 200. That's the stat
Exactly.
of the US. And to employ a team of people to not just go through that and find it, but you could be going through that and miss the diamond because you've been concentrating on something that isn't the diamond. It's a very tricky process, and it does require a lot of thought. Great question there, Jason. Let's have a look. I want to see if we can squeeze in another couple of questions before we finish. We've got one from Tim and one from Jitten. Let's have a look at Tim's comment here. And Tim has put, it would be so good to understand why the broker model works well in North America and has struggled in many other countries. Could it be, for some reason, the reluctance for franchisors outside the US market paying chunky commissions? We just talked there about 40%, about 20 to 30,000. It is a chunky commission. It's absolutely a chunky commission, but does it represent value? As an accounting professional, you must have to sort of see the difference between someone looking at their books of 3 years and thinking, okay, well, look, this is what we spent on our in-house franchise recruitment team. This is what we spent on our advertising on platforms, our work on LinkedIn. All of that has a cost. And whether we're talking 5 figures at 20 or 30,000 or 100,000, right? They both have costs, but it's just applying that in a different way, isn't it? I suppose at least with a broker, you have the cost when you have a franchisee.
Yeah, from a cash flow perspective, working with as a franchisor, working, obviously I'm not a franchisor, but if I were a franchisor, the appeal of working with a broker makes a lot of sense, because I'm not paying out the expense until I get paid the revenue, right? Like so that's great. From a cash flow perspective, it makes a ton of sense. And so, I mean, that's why it works. That's why so many franchisors do it. And then in terms of I am someone who's only well-versed and familiar with U.S. tax code and working with franchise professionals in the U.S. So I can't answer the second half of Tim's statement / question here, is because I don't know how it is. It could be certain compliance things, tax codes in other states, whatever it is. But I could see a reluctance to pay chunky commissions as a hesitance. But from a cash flow, I am a CPA, I am a business owner, and, I deal with cash flow every day for my own business as well as for my clients' businesses. And for sure, it's like, all right, well, it may be, 20 or 30K or, 40% of the initial franchise fee, but we only pay it whenever we get paid the franchise fee revenue. So, only paying out whenever we get paid, versus having to pay out of pocket, and with our own internal team, the former makes a lot of sense for that reason.
Yeah, I think so. I think you talk there about cash flow and it's really, really relevant. We've got about 5 minutes left.
Simon, real quick, Simon, I wanted to bring this up and I forgot about it, but Simon's like, at the end of the day, like, the franchisors, to be successful,
let me just read
royalty. Yeah, long-term royalty. Go ahead.
Let me just read Simon's comment out quickly. You have to measure the return on investment over the lifetime of the franchise agreement, not the initial franchise fee. What that franchise will generate in royalties over their franchise term. This is really, really important to realize as a franchisor when you're looking at the cost of
franchisors are not, and forgive me, Harvey, I'm just like, it really, I'm passionate about this, obviously. Forgive me for interrupting. Yeah, like, so franchisors are not in it for the franchise fee revenue. Like the franchise, the initial franchise fee revenue is pretty much just covering costs. It's covering any costs, like the broker commission, maybe any internal sales commissions, the cost of like initial training and marketing for that new franchisee. Like, for the most part, the initial franchise fee is a wash on the franchisor's financial statements. But it's, if the franchise broker is, vetting all of these candidates out there, right, and they separate the good from the bad, and they bring the franchisor good candidates, those good candidates invest, and there's a franchise fee, and that franchise fee covers all the startup costs mentioned, and then that candidate has a better chance of being successful year over year over year over year. That means royalty revenue to the franchisor year over year over year over year, and that's where the money is.
Absolutely, and that's where the success of a franchise business lies. It's in the success of the franchisees. If you have happy, successful franchisees that are making money and they're happy and they're enjoying their business and they're making money, then you as a franchisor are making money, and that's absolutely where it is. So I suppose it brings us to the fact that whether you use a broker, whether you use a consultant, or whether you use your own internal teams, it's about the quality of the people you bring to the table. It's about whether they're aligned with your businesses. And if you bring the right people and you nurture those people like a garden, then you're going to have a better franchise experience. We have come to the end. We could continue talking, but I know these wonderful people have places to be. We will quickly put up that comment because that's a lovely one. Welcome, Jim. And Jim's put, great conversation, guys. Thanks so much. What a well-informed guest. Well, there you go. A lovely compliment to finish with there.
Thank you, Jim.
Mike. Mike, before I get on to introducing what's happening next week, perhaps you could please let people know a little bit about what you do now and the best way to get in contact with you in about a minute or two.
Yep, and I'll try to even keep it less than that, Harvey. So I own an accounting and tax practice in the United States, right? A CPA firm, right? Certified Public Accountant. We're a CPA firm for individuals and business for small businesses and individuals. We have a niche working with franchisee businesses as well as real estate professionals and real estate investors. We're U.S. based. We work with we're for U.S. clients. My website is reedercpagroup.com. Reeder, REEDER, CPAgroup.com. My email is michael@reedercpagroup.com. I give out my cell phone for better or for worse. I'm a millennial. My cell phone is 847-302-3397. Call me, leave a voicemail, text me, WhatsApp. And I have an inquiry section on my website. You can submit an inquiry and get a call scheduled with me and my team. Would love to talk to you.
Fantastic. And Mike, if you can drop all of those details into the comments of this, then people can, of course, see that and make contact with you as well. So thank you. First of all, thank you to everyone who has joined us here live today, everybody who watches this in the future. And thank you to you, Mike. It's been a fantastic conversation. You've given a fantastic and balanced view of what a broker is, how we might use them, and what's important in our franchise businesses. I think it's going to be a conversation that will warrant many, many conversations here on the show. So I think we will approach it from all sorts of different angles in the future. But it's been a wonderful conversation today. So thank you very much indeed for that. So,
real pleasure, Harvey. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. So let me talk about a little bit about what's coming up. Our sister show, Franchising Brand Stories, is due to start season 4 on the 14th of November, where we will be talking to the wonderful Dan Archer from Visiting Angels, and we will be getting under the hat of another fantastic franchise brand. And next week on the franchise show, we are talking about how to sell a franchise. And we are talking franchise promotion. We're talking about franchise recruitment. And we're going to be talking to the lovely Jonathan Breiter. Jonathan has been a guest with his franchise school. We were live in his classroom. And Jonathan was responsible for the promotion and bringing Barney the dinosaur and Elmo to our lovely toy shops and to our wonderful children. So he's a real expert in introducing these things to market, and it's going to be another fascinating conversation. So please join us for the franchise show next Tuesday, 5:15 GMT. And I believe clocks will change, so it'll be back to 12:15 EST. And until next time, my friends, take very good care.